to the brand new episode of the Code Raw. So last week we discussed the basics of CSS and how to use different selector methods and how to apply a CSS in our HTML file. So this week we're going to deal with CSS colors and have a quick revision of what we did in the last video. So first we're going to talk about colors and what colors are. So CSS basically supports many predefined format for colors like color names, RGB, HSL, Hex values, RGBA and Hsla values. So we are going to discuss all of these different formats of colors and let's get started. Okay, so we made our file already and we're going to open this in Visual Studio Code and we'll open that next.html file and you can see that I've already made the paragraph which we're going to use to style. So we're using class selectors and you might remember that there are three selectors in CSS. The first one is class selector, the second one is the division selector and the third one is the ID selector. So three different selectors and we're going to stick with the class selector here. So we're going to use different color formats. So let's name these classes as different color formats. So first one is going to be color name, as this will be the first color format we're going to deal with. So color formats are basically color names like red, green, yellow, etc. So let's add some style here. We'll add the style tag. And inside of style tag we're going to add our class selector, which is color name, and inside of it we're going to add some style. So let's add a background here. Now a background is basically what will be the background of your text. So for example, there are two layers in any element. The first is the foreground where your text is displayed or written, and then there's the background on which the text is written. So for example, your paper is the background and text you write with a pencil or pen is the foreground. So like that. So if we are changing the background color, we're changing the basically the color of the paper. So let's add a background of gray. And when we hit save and go live, you can see that we have our paragraph which has a gray background. And you can see that the text is not as good as visible in the gray background. So this is an important rule of thumb you should remember, that your background and foreground should be contrasting to each other. So for example, if you're using a dark background, then use a light font color or foreground, and if you're using a dark foreground like black, so you should have a light background like white. So in this case we're using a dark background which is gray, so black text does not look very contrasting. So we're going to change the color of the text. So let's add a white background or white foreground, white color. So let's do that. We'll add this color attribute, and using color attribute we can change the color of text color, basically the color of by which the text is written. So we'll add color, and since we're using color names, we'll just write white and we hit save. Now you can see that we have a gray background and a white foreground or white text color. So this is how you use color name. Now this is how you use color names in CSS to change background and text colors, and HTML and CSS basically supports 140 standard color names, which actually includes something like white smoke, Alice blue, and maybe tomato red, like that. So there are 140 colors which you can use, and I'll link the names of those in the description below. So the second format is RGB and RGBA. So RGB is basically what we say red, green and blue. So using these three colors you can make any color. You might have heard this statement, and we're going to use that, and we're going to use that theory to make up all the colors. So RGB are basically values, and those values range from 0 to 235. So let's say if we have a color value of RGB 000, that means that that color does not has any red component to it, any green component to it, or any blue component to it. And let's say if we have an RGB 255, so it has the red component at its max, green component at its max, and blue component at its max. So if we give an RGB 000, it's going to generate a black color because there are no components at all, and at 255 they generate a white color because it's full of everything. So these values range from 0 to 255 for all that red, green and blue. So we'll add a more class and let's see how that works. Now we'll just copy this and we'll make one more paragraph, and we'll call it color. Instead of color we're just going to write RGB, and we'll give breaks here just to distinguish. Now we have an RGB here. Let's add our class RGB, and inside of it we want to give RGB value. So we'll say background and RGB, this is the format, and inside of bracket you have to write the values. So in a background I want a dark background, so I'll give very low values of all of those. So let's say 100 is too high, so we'll say 40 of black, 50 of blue, green and 60 of blue. And when I hit save, you can see that we have almost darkest green color here, darkest green, and the text is not visible at all. So as I might have already said that we want contrasting colors for background and foreground, so we'll add a color which will have really high values. So let's say 200 for red, 190 for blue and 180 for green. So these are really contrasting values, and when we hit save, you can see that we have some orange tint going on here with white, and these are not actually too much contrasting, but yeah, you can read the text and you can distinguish the text from the background, so it works. Now this is how you use RGB, but you can actually add one more component which we call alpha component or A, which is used for making the color transparent. So let's make one more class here, one more paragraph, and we'll say it as RGBA. Now we'll just add a component here, an A component, and in background you can see that I've just added one more A. So this A component or alpha component is used for setting the transparency of the color. Its value ranges between 0 to 1, and it's going to be 0 0.1, 0 0.2, 0 0.3 like that till 1.0. So we'll add a very dark background, so we'll add something like 0.8. This is really dark, and in text we'll add really light background, so we'll say 0.4 maybe. So when we hit save, you can see that we have different color altogether. It's not because these are different colors, but it's because that the white color from the background, it's actually blending in, so it's looking like it's different colors, but in actuality it's just those colors, but they are a lot more transparent. So if I set it to 1.0 in both of these, which will be fully opaque, you can see that those two paragraphs are the same. Yeah, I forgot an A here. So yeah, you can see that these are the same. Now this is how it works. So we'll just let it be 0.4 and 0. So this is RGB and RGBA. Now we're done with RGB and RGBA. So we'll move on to HSL and Hsla. So HSL is mostly used like an RGB, so we call an HSL function, and inside of this we get the values, but there's some catch here. So these HSL values are basically H for hue, S for saturation and L for lightness. So the first value, hue, ranges from 0 to 360. So you start with a blackish color or reddish color, and then you go back 360 and you again come back to a reddish color. So this is how the hue works. And then we have saturation and lightness, which are percentage values. So we'll give a percentage in saturation, so how much saturation you want in percentage and how much lightness you want in percentage. So this is how HSL works, and let's try it once. So we'll just copy it again and we'll see an HSL class. So we'll make one HSL class here, and we want to give background in form of HSL values. So in HSL we want to give values from 0 to 360 in hue, so we'll lie something around 180, and then we want to give percentage of saturation and lightness, so we'll say 60%, and then I think we need to give this percent 60% and then 70%. And when we hit save, you can see that we have some color going on here. Now you can see that this is a really light background, and actually our black background is working really well in it, so we'll just leave it like that only. And now in HSL also we have that A component, that alpha component. So using that alpha component, you can add an transparency effect going on here. So we'll just add this, let's see, HSL A, and in the background we'll have HSL A, and that A component again ranges from 0 to 1, and this background is already light, so I don't think that we need to give it lighter shade. We'll just set it to 0.6, not too much light, not too much dark. And when we hit save, you can see that it's just a little bit lighter than before because the white color is blending in from the background in the paragraph. So this is HSL A. Now these are how many different formats? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. These are the 5 formats. Okay, now we have one more format left, and that is what I use mostly, which is called Hex. So we made our class of Hex, and we want to add some style to it. Now before that, Hex is basically representation of color in hexadecimal values. So for example, you have that RGB 40, 50, 60. So what if you convert it in hex? What will the values get? So that's what hex is. So for example, if you want a white background, what will give? That we want an RGB of full, so 255, 255, 255. So when you convert it in hex values, it will be FF, FF, and FF. So 3 FF values. That will be hex for white. And similarly, if you want to give just a red color, so what your red is going to be R of 255, and then G0, and then blue 0. So then again you'll just add an hash FF for red 255, and then 00 for green 0, and then blue 0. So like that, make hex values like that. This combination which we use is just basically convert the RGB values in hexadecimal values and then add a hash before it because it's a hash value, so it works like that. Let's just see it working. Yeah, so we'll add a background, and let's add some other color here. Let's add something like a green. Okay, we actually have a green already, so it's bluish green and a darkish green. So let's add a reddish thing here, or orange maybe. So we'll add an orange here, FF9900. So when we use this color, this will give us an orange hue and orange color to the background, and you can see that we have this orange color here. Now orange and black, this is not actually really contrasting. You can read the black text on an orange background, but you want to make it more visible. It should be clear, it should be crisp, and it should be visible to everyone whoever wants to write. So we'll add a color, and we'll add a white text color here, because if you're using a dark background, then white is the way to go. So we'll add a white color here, and hit save. You can see that, well, actually it's a little bit too bright and it's not visible, we'll just decrease these values. We'll just set it to maybe BBB. Okay, so this is really bright, so it's not actually visible. Let's just add, let's just decrease the value here. We'll darken the background a little bit, and we want BD here. Well, yeah, now it's really fine. So you can see that we have a dark background and we have a light foreground or text color, and there is the format you use. So this is how we use different color formats to implement colors in CSS. And that's it for today, guys. Hit the like button if you liked the video and subscribe to the channel if you loved it. I'll see you on the next episode of the Code Drop. Bye for now.